It's the end of the month and that can only mean one thing. That's correct, it's time for video game pickups, and of course, because of No Fun February, and thanks again for that Scott and Jen over at Retro Rivals, March was, well, it was a little bit mad, because sitting beside me here I've got almost 50 games to show you just from my pickups in March, so unless you're Super Jimtendo, that is, everyone else, hold on and wait and see after these. Hello friends and welcome back to Generation Pixel, and of course it's time for pickups, and as per normal I'll be running through these pickups in chronological order, starting with the new systems and working my way back towards that juicy retro at the end. And to start with this month I thought, well, I'll dive straight into the Switch pickups because there's definitely a theme when it came to the pickups for the Switch this month. And first up we have Crash Bandicoot The Insane Trilogy. Now this is an absolute classic trilogy, it's one that I've got up there on the PlayStation 2 obviously, and I've even moved on to the PlayStation 3 games and the PlayStation 4 games, but as you can see I can now play this on the go on the Switch anytime that I want to play some Crash Bandicoot. Now this is a little bit more difficult, or these ports of this particular game are just a little bit more difficult than the originals due to some tinkering in the mechanics, but you know what, it's still a worthy pickup and I'm quite happy to have this in the collection now. Next up for the Switch, you'll see that I'm definitely following a set route when I'm buying for the Switch at the moment, because next up we have Oddworld A Stranger's Wrath. Now this was originally obviously the Xbox original, the OG Xbox game, but of course Oddworld and the Abe games go right back to the Sony PlayStation. It's a franchise I absolutely love. I've had them and do have them on the original formats, but to have this HD remaster on the Switch, again, it's another fantastic retro remaster that I can play on the go. So that's Oddworld A Stranger's Wrath. Now the third and last game that I've picked up for the Switch this month is, well, it follows the same path as the last two that you just saw. It's another HD remaster of retro classics, or definitely classics, because it's Grandia 1 and 2 on the Grandia HD collection. Now anyone out there with eagle eyes will notice that this is not a UK PAL copy, no. Bought this one off of PlayAsia.com, and that's a danger website, let me just tell you right there. I'm not going to be looking at that too often, but when I saw that I could grab this game, and this was one of the games that sort of drove me towards the Switch. Yes, you can have your Breath of the Wilds and whatnot, but for me it's been able to play these old retro HD remasters either on the big screen or even handheld on the Switch. That's what drew me into the Switch, playing these classics on a handheld system, which is pretty much what I use my PS Vita for, but now I can do it on the Switch with that wonderful OLED screen. But then again, the Vita's got an OLED screen too, but you know what I mean. And that was the last game that I picked up for the Switch, the Grandia HD collection. So moving away from the Switch, we'll move on to the PlayStation 4 pickups, and for me when I'm picking up PlayStation games tend to fall into one of several categories. Either games have been recommended, games that I want in my collection that I've had in the past and no longer have, games that have been recommended to me by someone else, someone probably like you, games where the artwork just drew me in, and maybe even the back blurb, even though that can be a mistake, and if you've watched some of my previous videos you'll know that can be a mistake, but yes, sometimes the artwork draws me in. And finally, of course, the truly bad games. I love nothing more than a truly bad game, and I will go, well, I'll move mountains to find them at times, but what I'll do now is go through these PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3 and 2 and talk about the games and which category that they fall into, why I bought them, rather than just show you the game that I bought. And starting of course with the PlayStation 4, we have a game that I bought purely on the artwork, and also maybe because of a little nostalgia for this particular story, and that is Monkey King Hero is Back. Now I haven't played this game, I don't know anything about it, I haven't even seen any gameplay footage of it. But of course I was a huge fan of Monkey Magic. Now you probably have to be a bit older to remember Monkey Magic, but it was an old Japanese TV show based on, of course, the Monkey King, who has to take the priestess Tripitaka across on her odyssey to the west. But let's not get into the TV show because I have no idea whether this particular game has anything to do with it. The art style and the name obviously suggests, but I don't know at the moment. I'm looking forward to throwing this in and giving it a try and just seeing if it does adhere to the old story, and that is Monkey King, Hero is Back. Now, second up for the PlayStation 4 was a game that I picked up not because I wanted it. This is another one where I picked it up because of not just the box art, but something a bit special inside the actual box itself, and that game is Wargroove. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this because I hadn't heard of this game before. I haven't seen any footage on YouTube about it, and no one's recommended me this game. I just saw this sitting on the shelf and I thought, well, it looks kinda interesting. But the thing that got me, the thing that really got me, is when you open it up and you find that Wargroove on the PlayStation 4 has a manual. Now, I mean, most of you out there will understand that manuals are not a thing anymore. You just don't get them. But to get a game these days that has a manual in its case is just a thing of beauty, especially when it's, well, 8th generation and beyond. So I was more than happy to pick up that, and I can't wait to play this game because it's a bit of an RPG, or so I've heard. Well, what I can tell from the back anyway. So it's definitely one maybe to look out for if you're a fan of old school RPGs, but more importantly if you're a fan of having games with a physical full colour manual inside, and that is Wargroove. So the next two games I'm going to be talking about are recommendations. Games that have been recommended by people like you, and well, people in the real world as well. Although, let's face it, it's people on YouTube, just like yourself watching this, that tend to do most of the recommendations. And the first one is one that's been recommended by the whole world basically, and it's one that I should have got round to a lot sooner, but I'm here now, and that is Ghost of Tsushima. Now, of course, this game, I don't need to talk about it, everybody knows what this game is. They know how it plays, and they know how it looks, which is stunning in every department. I just didn't get round to playing it at launch, and it took the backlog for a while, but I've finally picked it up and I'm looking forward to playing this, and I'm sure people like Bill at the Betty Horde Clinic will be over the moon that I've finally picked up this boy, because he absolutely loves this, as do many other people out there. So I'm happy to have Ghost of Tsushima in the collection. So the second recommendation for a PlayStation 4 kinda came out of the blue. I was having a chat with Tom over at Sega Head, and he said to me, I've got a game for you, a game that you'll absolutely adore and you must play, and that game is Valkyria Chronicles. And let me tell you, he wasn't wrong. I did pick it up as soon as he recommended it to me, and I started playing it almost immediately. I'm currently several chapters, and I believe I'm in chapter 7 at the moment, which is absolutely kicking my backside, but I am thoroughly enjoying this game. It's a wonderful anime style, turn-based, tactical RPG, but with the added bonus that when you move your units in this game, it's not just like your basic old tactics chessboard move. No, you move your characters in third person, so you have to run your character to their cover zone or wherever you want them to go. You have to aim their gun and fire at the target that you choose. It's really quite unique. I've never played anything like it before, and it's got me absolutely hooked. So it's another big thank you to Tom at Sega Head for this recommendation, and that's Valkyria Chronicles. Now my next pickup is for another system, and we're moving on to the Vita. Now this will be my first ever Vita game, and I've had a Vita for a little while, as most of you will probably know, but I tend only to play PlayStation 1 classics on it. I love nothing more than to sit down with that wonderful little OLED handheld and play things like Final Fantasy VII or Suikoden and Suikoden 2. But I've decided after watching a lot of Chronic Spartan that it's time to start getting a few pieces into the physical collection. So the first ever, well, Vita game that I've picked up for the collection is of course Assassin's Creed Liberation. Now anybody who who knows me knows I'm a big fan of that Assassin's Creed franchise. This was a no-brainer. Of course I will be looking at getting Uncharted The Golden Abyss, but I haven't heard great things about that, and I don't want to spoil any sort of memories of any of the Uncharted games. So I'm going to start with Assassin's Creed Liberation, which I'm sure will do a decent job of an Assassin's Creed game on a handheld, so that's coming into the collection. So moving away from the Vita, we move on to the PlayStation 3. And the first selection of games I'm going to show you are games from a series or a subset that I'm collecting for. And the first game in that particular vein is Mercenaries 2 World in Flames. Now I do know that this particular game came out on the PlayStation 2 as well, and yes, PlayStation 2 is where the heart of my collection is at the moment, but when I saw this out in the wild I thought it was worth to pick it up. Even if I do down the line pick up the PlayStation 2 port of this game, I'll be able to play them side by side just to see what the differences are. And you know what? It's a Pandemic game. Pandemic have done some wonderful games like Saboteur for example, and it was well worth it, in my opinion anyway, to get this into the collection, and that is Mercenaries 2 World in Flames. Now the next game that I'm collecting, which is part of a series that I want to collect for, is Just Cause 2. Now I love Just Cause 3, and Just Cause 4 was very good as well. It wasn't quite as fun to me as Just Cause 3, but I've heard Just Cause 2 is, well, the jewel in the crown. Now I don't know because I haven't played it yet, but I'll certainly get round to it, and this adds, and I believe it completes the Just Cause collection for me. And I do like a bit of just mindless destruction in a game. It's just good fun. That's all I can say about the Just Cause games, or at least the Just Cause games that I've played. And how many times can you say Just Cause, because that's Just Cause 2 into the collection. So the third and final game that I've picked up, because it's part of a series or a subset that I need to get back into the collection, and that is Final Fantasy Lightning Returns. And the reason that I picked this up is because I had it on the Xbox 360, and yes, it was fine to have it on the 360, but the entirety of my Final Fantasy collection are all on PlayStation, going right back of course. So that's where I want Final Fantasy's home to be. I have moved on my Xbox 360 copy and got this in return, and I'm absolutely over the moon. Now Final Fantasy XIII wasn't my favourite of the Final Fantasy games by a long stretch, but I've heard that this one is not too bad, and I haven't played it yet because of previous experiences with 13, so happy to get it in the collection and looking forward to seeing if it improves on, well, the first game in this particular subset of a series, and that is Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII. These games here are games that I want back into the collection because I've had them in the past, and it's time for them to come home. And the first one of that ilk is Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Again, I don't need to talk too much about this game, everybody knows how absolutely awesome it is, and of course, being a huge Star Wars fan, it's a must have in the collection. Like any other Star Wars games, let's be quite honest here, when you geek out or nerd out about something, you just want it all, and that's Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Now the second game that I'm bringing back into the collection because I need it in the collection again as well, it's a game that never actually left the collection because I bought this game digitally when it came out, and I've never had it physically before, but it's here with me now, and some people might be a bit surprised that I've bought this particular game, and that's because it's Warhawk, which is an online war game, a game that has no servers anymore, or none that I can find anyway, but it's a game that I put in so many hours to back in the day. It was such good fun, and part of the reason for that was quite simply, it wasn't a first person shooter war game like Call of Duty and the likes, it was third person, so I could play this without motion sickness. So the amount of hours I pummeled into this game, well, I dare to think about it. I'm just glad that PlayStation 3 didn't count how many hours you were putting into a game the way that the PlayStation 4 and 5 does, so happy to get this into the collection in a physical form, even though I'll never be able to play it, and that is Warhawk. Now the next game that I picked up for the PlayStation 3 was quite purely and simply a game that I decided I wanted because I like to look at the box art and the blurb on the back, which can often be a mistake, but the game that I was drawn to buy is Damnation. Now, I don't know anything about this game other than it looks cool and it's set in a steampunk world, and that is always going to drag me in a steampunk world. I could show you some wonderful things sitting around this room that are related to steampunk and steampunkery, as we like to call it in the community, and well, this is a steampunk game. I wasn't not going to pick it up. It's probably terrible, and you know what? If it's a terrible game, at least it falls into that particular category for my own personal collection, and that is Damnation. Now, the next two games are recommendations again. People out there that have said to me, you need to get this game, or you should play this game, or maybe I've even just been watching gameplay footage on YouTube and thought to myself, I want that game. And the first one, well, it's Binary Domain, and it was Gordon at Gib84 Gaming that recommended this game. I'm sure I watched a video, I don't think I've seen any gameplay from him, but it was a pickups video and he went on about it, and I'm sure I've heard him talking about it on other social media. If I'm wrong and I've actually sat and watched some gameplay, Gordon, I do apologise. But you've got to remember just how much YouTube we all watch these days. But there we go, thanks to Gordon, I've picked up Binary Domain for the PlayStation 3. So the second recommendation is yet another recommendation from good old Tom. It's Sega Head, because while we were talking, we got round to talking about Command and Conquer. Now, there was a game that I loved back in the day, back in the 90s on the PC, but I don't think I've ever played one properly on a console. So when I saw this out in the wild, and that is Command and Conquer Red Alert 3, I just simply had to pick it up. I haven't played it yet. Half dreading playing it just in case it just destroys some of the memories from playing the original Command and Conquer games back on the PC in the 90s, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll get round and sit down and play it, well, at least once I get over or get through Valkyria Chronicles, that is. And there you go, that's Command and Conquer Red Alert 3. Now, the final game for the PlayStation 3 it's a bad game. It's a game that is universally panned, and that's the type of game that I just love to have in my collection. And it's also a game I didn't know about until fairly recently, and it was thanks to YouTube. Watching a video, I saw this game pop up and they flashed up the Metacritic score, which is always super accurate, and it was a stonking 27 if I remember correctly. And when I saw that, I thought, I've got to have this game. I was straight on eBay and found the first copy I could get. It wasn't expensive, which is handy when it comes to games like this, I suppose. And that is Rogue Warrior. Now, I can't tell you anything about this game other than the low Metacritic score, but that's exactly the type of, sometimes so bad they're actually a little bit good games that you get out there, and I'm hoping this is one of them. That's kind of the impression I got from the video that I was watching that spurred this idea my way. But there we go, into the collection we have Rogue Warrior. So moving away from the PlayStation 3, we're moving on to the Wii. And with the Wii, I only picked up one game, and I picked up one game because, well, I just wanted it in my collection. I've never had it before, never played it, know nothing about it, and that is Doctor Who Return to Earth. Now, as I said, I can't really talk to you much about this game other than it's Doctor Who, and I do like a bit of Doctor Who. Well, that's a bit of an understatement. I absolutely love a bit of Doctor Who. Now, don't get me wrong, Matt Smith in this is probably not my favourite. That would have to be Tom Baker. If you don't know who Tom Baker is, then one, you're too young, and two, you should Google it, because that man's an absolute legend. But of course, it's a Doctor Who game. I don't think I've got any other Doctor Who games in the collection, which is a bit of an oversight. So here it is, Doctor Who Return to Earth for the Wii, in the collection now, and that's where it's going to stay. Moving away from the Wii, we move on to the Nintendo DS. Now, that's a system that I didn't have a great deal of experience with back in the day. I did have one for a short while. There were a couple of games that I did enjoy on it, and I'll probably get them back into the collection too. But this month, well, 2 games, and both of them, well, just because I wanted to pick them up. One because, well, it was another Doctor Who game, and this is Doctor Who Evacuation Earth. Now, I don't know anything about this. I don't know whether it's linked to the Wii game that I'd picked up. All I know, it's another Doctor Who game and it's starring Matt Smith again, so feel free to hit me up in the comments, anyone who knows anything about any of these two Doctor Who games, and whether I've made the right decision in starting with these two to start, well, a Whovian collection of video games. So that's Doctor Who, Evacuation Earth. Now, the second game that I picked up for the DS is a game that I picked up purely on its looks, on the aesthetics of its case, and well, maybe the gameplay will be okay. It's a type of game that I quite enjoy. I suppose it's a management simulation game, but as you're going to see, it's not quite what you would probably expect from me anyway, because that game is Betty Boop's Double Shift. I think mostly the reason that I picked up this game, other than how stunning that artwork is, let's face it, if you're a child of the 70s or before obviously, then this was this type of cartoons that you grew up on. Now, I probably wouldn't have been quite as drawn to it if I haven't been watching so much of Retro Bear with his delves into the old cartoons. I have been, so Russ, thank you very much for keeping that sort of retro cartoon theme running through my head while I'm walking through game stores and ending up buying things like this. I'm sure the game will be fine. I'm going to give it a try because I do like a management sim. Even if you're Betty Boop and you're managing a jazz club, who knows, it might be good fun. And that's Betty Boop's Double Shift. So moving on, obviously we're moving on to the PlayStation 2, which, yep, it's the heart of the collection, the area that I'm trying to focus in on. Yes, I know I don't focus in too well. I know if I see something shiny elsewhere, I get distracted and go running after that. I do try my best just to focus down onto the PlayStation 2, well, when I give myself the chance. Now, of course, the same sort of categories that I had for the previous pickups, and starting with, well, games that are part of a subset or a series that I need up in the collection. Now, technically the first game I'm going to show you is already up there in the collection, but it's part of a triple pack, and this is Crash Tag Team Racing, all on its lonesome in its own box. Yes, that might be a bit OCD, but let's face it, we're gamers and collectors, and sometimes we are just a tad like that, and I'm happy to have on its own, in its own box, Crash Tag Team Racing in the collection. Now, the next game that I've brought in, because it's part of a series or a subset that I'm collecting for, is, well, it's in Matrix, The Path of Neo. Now, I haven't played any of the Matrix games yet. I did play that wonderful Unreal Engine 5 Matrix experience on the PlayStation 5, which was, chef's kiss, beautiful. Can't wait to see full games made in that engine and when it gets to its peak. But that's me digressing again and moving off in a tangent. But into the collection, I have The Matrix, Path of Neo. Next up in the series collection, well, a few of you probably would have reckoned this was coming anyway, and that's Mercenaries 2 World in Flames, but this time on the PlayStation 2. I picked it up on the very same day that I picked up the PlayStation 3 version. Picked up the PlayStation 3 first, saw this, had to get it because it was PlayStation 2, and I kept the PlayStation 3 one, like I said before, because I'll get to play them back to back just to see what differences are actually in them, and that's Mercenaries 2 World in Flames. So next into the collection for a subset or series, we have Max Payne. Now, I haven't played any of the Max Payne games. I do have 3 up there on the PlayStation 3, and now I have this on the PlayStation 2. I'm still on the hunt for, well, Max Payne 2. Once I have them all together, then I'll sit down and play them in order, and that's when I'll finally get round to them. But until I see it, well, I'm just going to have to make do with the fact that I've got Max Payne on the PlayStation 2. So next up for a series or a subset game, we have a game that, well, it's a travesty that it's not in my collection already, and that's pretty much the same for the next couple that are coming up as well. And the first one in that kind of double ilk is Deus Ex. Now, I loved Deus Ex Human Revolution, and Deus Ex Mankind Divided was another wonderful addition into that series. I have never played the first game. Now, I was watching 3 Drinks In, a wonderful channel, a group of guys on YouTube who remind me so much of myself back in the 90s. Well, they were playing this, and I almost stood up and slapped myself. Why don't you have this already? So thank you guys there, you know who you are, and Deus Ex into the collection. And again, another game that should be in the collection, part of a series where I have, well, the other 2 games in the series, and that is, well, it's Red Dead Revolver. Again, I haven't played this, and I believe it was 3 drinks in again that we're playing this. They play so many great games from this era, and it's one of the reasons I like to watch them. But they're playing games that I missed out back in the day, and games like this that I should have in the collection, because I loved the later games. I mean, Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 are just masterpieces, and my opinion anyway, and it should be yours. But there we go, finally into the collection we have Red Dead Revolver. And last but not least is a game that should have been in my collection a long time ago. I do have other games in the series and just missed out in this one, and it's God of War now. No doubt Scott from Retro Rivals is probably going to be smashing his head into a desk when he realises I don't have this and have never played it. But don't worry Scott, I will get round to this. This is on the must-do list, and it should, or hopefully will be getting played this year as well. But here it is, it's in the collection, it's God of War. So coming up next are PlayStation 2 games that I just want in my collection, games that I haven't played before, but I believe belong in the collection anyway. To be honest with you, that's mostly any PlayStation 2 game. Well, maybe not anyone, but a good deal of them. And coming up first in that particular category, we have Scalar. Now Scalar, from what I remember, is one of those 3D platformer collectathon games, much like Jak and Daxter and Crash Bandicoot and the likes. And I didn't play it back in the day, didn't own it back in the day, and I thought now's the time to get it back into the collection, the forever collection, the Omega collection as I like to call it. But there we have it, into the collection for the first time and gonna stay there. We have Scalar. Now the next game that's coming into the collection that I just wanted in the collection, it's a game I've again never had before, never played before, but I kinda should have as well with this one, because it comes from a TV show that I absolutely adored, and that was Robot Wars, and this is Robot Wars Arenas of Destruction. Now if you don't know what Robot Wars are, it's quite simply teams of people built little robots that beat the living crap out of each other's robots, and what's not fun about that? A bit of mindless destruction on your TV set. So this hopefully emulates that experience on a PlayStation 2 as well as it can. I would have loved to have been able to make robots back in the day, and you know what, I think it was Cy Ginger Hippie Gaming that gave me the taste for this, because he actually went to see one of the live events that happened fairly recently, just last year. So here we have Robot Wars Arenas of Destruction. So the next game that's coming into the collection, just because I've never had it before and it should be in the collection, it must be in the collection, it's Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. Now this game skipped me past, I'll be frankly honest with you. I had no idea about it at all until I watched a video by LGR, Lazy Game Reviews. Yes, he's a bigger established channel, he does mostly tech and old PC stuff, but every now and again he throws in some gameplay. He highlighted the fact that I missed this game from back in the early noughties, and I shouldn't have missed it. I am a Star Wars fan, but I'm also a Star Trek fan, a Doctor Who fan. Any sort of fantasy or science fiction is right up my street, and I don't discriminate against either. So into the collection came Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. Another game coming into the collection for the first time that should be in the collection, it must be in the collection, and it's kind of part of a subset you'll see in a second. I mean, it's part of many subsets when you think about it, but that is Star Wars Racer's Revenge. Now yes, this is the pod racing game. I loved the arcade version, the sit down arcade version. I wish I could get my hands on one of those. I wish I had the room for one of those if I could get my hands on one of those. But in the meantime, well, I've got this here in the PlayStation 2. You might have noticed that I did pick up the version on the Nintendo Switch, which is wonderful, it's great to play it handheld. I kind of want to compare it with the Switch one with the PlayStation 2 one, just to see how it differs, if, you know, have they made any significant tweaks or not, and which one do I ultimately like the best. So Star Wars Racer's Revenge in the collection. So next up we have the category where it was the box art or maybe the blurb on the back that drew me in. Games that I don't know about, games I've never played, never owned, and are not part of a series. And the first one is Thunderhawk Operation Phoenix. Now again, can't talk about this game, I have never played it, but when I saw box art like this, it just sort of harkened me back to Desert Strike, a game that I absolutely loved on the Sega Mega Drive, a game that I have for the Sega Mega Drive and do enjoy still playing. But you know what, if this is a PlayStation 2 sort of version of this, it's Core and Eidos that are involved in it, so who knows, this might just be a PlayStation 2 Desert Strike fix that, well, it's a bit easier to play than the old 16-bit machines, who knows, but it's in the collection now, and that's Thunderhawk Operation Phoenix. Now the next one up where it was the box art that drew me in, and when I show you the box art it'll probably draw you in too, and if it doesn't, what's wrong with you? And that's Giant's Citizen Kabuto. What's not to love about this box art? I mean, being a 70s kid and growing up through the 70s and 80s, things like King Kong and Godzilla, they were huge, and not just obviously literally huge, but they were such an important part of pop culture back then, and seeing this box art just harkens back to that time, and the thought of playing a game where you get to either combat against or be the giant monsters, that's just wonderful in my opinion, and this box art drew me in. It's probably an awful game, I don't know, I will find out, because this is one that I'll put on at least to dip in, to give a try and just see how either good or awful it truly is, and that's Giant's Citizen Kabuto. Next one up is pure box art again. The box art for this one just smacked me in the face when I saw it, and that is Disney's Donald Duck PK, and again, don't know anything about it. It appears that you're some sort of superhero version of Donald Duck, and I do like Donald Duck, and I do a mean Donald Duck impersonation. Not that you're going to see it here, but maybe in the future. But just look at that box art, it's absolutely fantastic, it's stunning. And it does have this little comic in the middle, this little comic book inside with the manual that's there for you to read if you want. I haven't played it, I will get round to trying it, I might even check out some, there must be footage of this game on YouTube somewhere, and that's what I'll probably do first. But just the box art alone was worth this game, and that's Donald Duck PK. Next up for games where it was the box art that drew me in, well, this next one is absolutely stunning, and that is Gungrave. Now, I don't know anything about the game, I've never played it, never owned it, don't know anyone who did, or if I did, I've completely forgotten about it. But the box art on this just looked fantastic, and reading on the back, it kinda had me intrigued as well. The controls are supposed to be quite intuitive, so who knows, I might give this one a go. Maybe it's an action game that I'll truly get into. I do sometimes veer away from my RPGs solid 24/7 and move into some action games, and this might be the one that does it, and that is Gungrave. And the last game where it was the box art that drew me in, well, it's not going to surprise you when you see this, because it's Valkyrie Profile 2, and it's a game obviously I've never played before, know nothing about. Well, all I know is that Valkyrie Profile on the PlayStation is quite expensive, so it might be a bit before I get the first game. But what we have here is a Square Enix game. It's probably an RPG of one type or another, and just look at that box art, absolutely stunning, right up my street, will sit up on that shelf beautifully, probably face out every now and again, and that is Valkyrie Profile 2, Silmeria. Okay, next up we have the recommendations. These are the PlayStation 2 games that you have recommended me to go and get, because, well, I haven't played them before, never had them in the collection ever, and you think that's a travesty. And the first one for the PlayStation 2 is Black, and this was recommended by, well, just about everyone who's played a first person shooter. Now, we're all aware that first person shooters gave me motion sickness back in the day. I'm getting a little bit better. I haven't tried any medication for it or magic bracelets or whatever, might try that too, but Black I missed out purely because it was a first person shooter. It is supposedly one of the best first person shooters of the time, and I had to get it, and there you go, in the collection, Black. Now, next up for the recommendations, I think this was Scott and Jen at Retro Rivals. I think, I'm not sure, I'm not 100%, but I'm sure it was. Now, I'm sure their copy was Xbox, where this is PlayStation, and the game itself is Dark Summit. And the reason, other than I'm sure it was Scott and Jen, almost positive it was them, and the reason was the same reason that I believe they had. It's not just a snowboarding game, but it's a sort of solve the mystery snowboarding game. So there's some sort of mystery happening on the mountain and you have to solve this mystery while snowboarding. Now, that is quite a unique concept, and one I don't think I've ever come across before in a video game, so I had to pick up, well, Dark Summit. Next recommendation is one again that's been recommended by multiple people. Most people again want this one on the Xbox. I don't really go down that route. Plus, it's more expensive on the Xbox, which is sometimes unusual. But we have Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast. Again, it's an arcade racer, not usually my cup of tea. I did of course play the original Outrun back in the arcades, back in the 80s, and absolutely loved it back then. I moved on to more simulation racers, but everybody says if you're going to have at least one Outrun in your modern console, or what I like to consider a modern console collection, then you have Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast. Now the next recommendation comes from Lame Dad Retro Gamer, my good buddy Dave, and it must be a good game. Well, he didn't actually recommend it, he more didn't destroy it. Now anyone who's watched Dave's channel before, Lame Dad Retro Gamer, knows that if he comes across a game that he just absolutely despises, he gets out that circular saw and destroys the thing. This game, well, it survived it as far as I was aware. I didn't see any video footage that was contradictory to that statement, and that game is Onimusha 2, and it was because of Dave playing this game and talking about this game and ultimately not sawing it in half, smashing it into pieces, made me go out and buy this game. So Onimusha 2 is in the collection, which means I will have to, of course, get Onimusha 3 at some point. Now the last two recommended games for the PlayStation 2 come from the same source, the same recommendation, the same channel, and that is none other than the wonderful Hapesa Games. And that wonderful Irish YouTuber, content creator and streamer, well, he kind of recommended we needed Manhunt in our collections because, well, it's a Rockstar game, it's brutal, it was banned or tried to be banned, it's probably not as bad as it looks, it probably doesn't play as bad as it looks either, but it's a must have in your collection according to Hapes. And so Manhunt is in the collection. And the second game that the wonderful Hapesa Games recommended was none other than the Ting. Well, at least that's what he called it. Over here in Scotland we tend to pronounce the T and the H to say the thing. You know what, only joking Hapes, we love your accent really. Anyway, onto the game. Yes, he absolutely adored this game, so much so that not only did he recommend it to people, he played it for people to watch, and it really did captivate me, his gameplay footage, especially that mechanic where you have to gain trust with the NPCs in the game or things just go all wrong. So thank you very much for recommending this game and bringing it to my attention, Hapes, and I'm looking forward to playing the Ting sometime soon. So last up for the PlayStation 2, we're moving on to what is possibly one of my favourite categories, and that is, well, bad games. I do love a truly bad game, especially when they're so bad they're good. Sometimes they're just bad, but you know what, you take that gamble. And the first game that I've got in games that, well, are bad or should be bad is the Italian Job, the LA Heist. Now, this is based on a movie, this is based on, I believe it was Mark Wahlberg. Doesn't that just say it all? I don't mean to diss Mark because apparently he's done an okay job in Uncharted, but this movie was bad, and surely the game is going to be just as bad, and that's what I'm hoping for with this. It's hard enough to put together a decent racing or car game, and to do it with a movie licensed timescale, because let's face it, they don't get a lot of time to put these games together. This is going to be awful, so I'm quite happy to have this in the collection, the Italian Job LA Heist. Now the second bad game is a game that I saw on a YouTube channel, and I can't for the life of me remember who played this game, but it looked truly awful. It played quite jankily. But you know what, the cover art quite cool as well, so kind of harken me back to the days where cover art was important, as you've seen from other games I've picked up just recently, and that is Demon Summoner. Now I do love it when people spell demon with the AE, it gives it that sinister feel, doesn't it? As I said, I haven't really played it, I've watched some gameplay footage, it looks janky as all hell, but it's a bad game, and that bad game has got to end up in this wonderful Omega collection, and that's Demon Summoner. And the last game for the PlayStation 2, yes, is a bad game. I'm finishing on a bad game. It's a bad game that I've been hunting for quite a while, and I am over the moon to finally have, because this truly is awful. Again, it's a movie franchise tie-in, and it's a bad movie tie-in, and the game was truly awful itself. Haven't played it, have seen lots of gameplay on it, and that is Catwoman. Yes, that Halle Berry travesty of a movie, they turned it into a game, and why not? Because they're going to get money out of it one way or another, whether you're just a Halle Berry fan or a Batman fan. For me, it was because it was a bad game. Again, haven't played it to justify that myself, but I have seen enough gameplay footage and listened to plenty of reviews that let me know that this won't disappoint as being a truly bad game, and that is Catwoman. So moving away from the PlayStation 2, we're moving on to another system, and that system is the Nintendo 64. The N64, what Nintendo would have liked to have called the Nintendo Ultra, the NU, which maybe when you think about it, is why they come up with the Wii U. Food for thought, but I digress. Anyway, moving on to the game that I did buy for, well, the Nintendo 64. Now this is a game that I want in my collection. Yeah, I want it in my collection. I need it in my collection. It's not a bad game, but it's a game I've already got, and I got it also this month, which is weird because it's Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, so this is pretty much where it all started on the consoles. Yes, you had the wonderful arcade cab where you could sit down and race on the pod racer, but this here is supposed to be a fantastic version, and the reason I got this is, well, one, because it's a Star Wars game, but two, I can now compare this against both the PlayStation 2 version and the Switch version. And of course I'm going to have to get the version that was ported to the PlayStation 4 and do all four at one time. That might be an interesting video, but here we have Star Wars Racer for the N64. So moving on to the next system, we're moving on to the PlayStation, and it's such a wonderful system to collect for, but it's getting expensive as well, which is one of the reasons when it comes to PlayStation games, or the first PlayStation games, then it's games that I truly want in my collection. If I do see something exceptionally cheap that I liked back in the day or was interested in trying, maybe, then I would pick it up. But for the most part, when it comes to the PlayStation games, it's just the games that I want in, and they can be a bit pricier, but they're worth it to me. And the first one that I picked up, I actually got this on the 31st of January, and well, I couldn't show it in February because that would be a one video game pickups. Only Super Nintendo would like that probably. But anyway, here we go, and I picked up Breath of Fire 4. Now this game I absolutely adore, and I adore Breath of Fire 3 as well. I don't have 3 in the collection. I got rid of these both when, you know, got your hands on digital versions of these games, and it feels like such a big mistake now. It didn't at the time. You got rid of games, you didn't really care, because either you had played them and you thought you were done with them, or you had a digital version. But to have them physically back in the collection, and I can play it without internet, always handy. Well, Breath of Fire 4, I'm so happy to get this back into the collection. And the second and the last game that I picked up for the PlayStation is a game, yes, I want in the collection. It's a game that I've never had in the PlayStation collection. It's a game I've never played on the PlayStation, so quite intriguing, hey? And that is Final Fantasy Origins, and yes, this is the compilation of both Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy 2. I am quite looking forward to seeing how these perform. I know there were some maybe quality of life adjustments made in these games, maybe some cutscenes or something, I don't know, haven't played it, don't want to look too much into it, and until that Pixel remaster comes out for consoles, which surely it's going to come out for consoles and not just be stuck in mobile and I think PC. Please bring it out in consoles where you've got all the Final Fantasy games. Again, I digress. But anyway, I picked up Final Fantasy Origins. That's Final Fantasy 1 and 2 for the PlayStation, or the PlayStation 1 if you must. And I'm looking forward to trying these out just to see what difference they've made from the original old school games. Now the last game that I picked up, and that's right, we're on to the last game. And it's a game you've probably seen previously in a video. You got a sneak preview of it anyway. And that is none other than, for the ZX Spectrum, the Flintstones. And again, this is Tom Sega Head. It's his fault that I picked this up. This is not a good game. This is a truly awful game. It's not just bad because it doesn't work. It's bad because it's frustrating. It's bad because... Now, Tom, he plays this on the Master System, which is a much superior port of this particular game. And the Master System game is truly awful. You can only imagine how bad it is on the poor ZX Spectrum. I will be showing this, I will be playing this on the channel at some point because I need to get it out there and over that this is the worst port of this game, without a doubt. But I picked it up, I've got it physical now, and happy to have it in the collection to remind me that some bad games you just don't want to have, and that is the Flintstones on the ZX Spectrum. So there you go my friends, that was my pickups for March, and it was quite a haul, and if you've stayed with me this long, thank you very much indeed. And I hope you've seen some games in there that maybe piqued your interest, or games that took you back down a nostalgic trip somewhere, because that's why we tend to watch these pickups videos. It's not about me showing the games to you, it's about you remembering the games, or maybe even seeing a game that you might be interested in seeing. And of course, if you want to talk about any of that stuff, drop that down there in the comments, because the interaction between you and me is the most important thing on YouTube. Well, to me anyway. Thank you again for watching. It's been wonderful to show you all this March pickup now that No Fun February is over. And until next time, as always, cheerio!